Algebra chapter 9.5. We're going to talk about how to factor trinomials here. So if we have something that looks like x squared plus bx plus c, we're going to kind of reverse the order of or reverse the distributive property and sort of reverse the FOIL ideas that we did before and put them back into factored form. So let's first start off with when we have a binomial that looks like this, we know how to multiply this out. And I'm going to show this this one using the FOIL method, right? So we take x and we multiply it by x, and we get x squared. And we take x and we multiply it by 4. We take x and we multiply it by 4, and we get 4x. And then we take 3 and multiply it by x, and we get 3x. And we take 3 and multiply it by 4, and we get 12. Well, then we take the two middle terms here and we add them, and we end up with x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay? And what we're going to start working on here is we're going to take trinomials like this, and we're going to turn them back into their factored forms of like that. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's take a look at one of these. And we're going to look at, we're trying to take this thing and we're going to try to put it into a factored form. So it's going to look like, our final product here is going to look like x, right, plus something, and then x plus something else. Okay? Now, there's a couple things we want to look at. First, this end part right here, okay, is going to be the product of whatever this value is multiplied by whatever that value is. Okay, and so you want to look at it and say, what two numbers multiply to get to 18? Well, we know this could be what, like 18 times 1. That looks like it's a little hard to read. Let me get a different color here. You could have, let's see if this gray works. You could have nope, that's even worse. We'll go with white. That works. 18 times 1. We could have 9 times 2. We could have 6 times 3. And I think that's about it. Okay? So we know that two of these numbers, right? Two of these are going to go in here. So 18 and then 1, and then 9 might go here, and 2 there, and 6 is going to go here, and 3 goes here. Okay? Well, those are all possibilities to end up with 18. But what we want to look at, too, is we want to say, all right, well, then when we take this and multiply it here, and we take this value and multiply it by here, we end up adding them. So we're looking at which two factors over here are going to add to 11. Okay? Well, if I add these, I get 19. If I add these, I get 11. If I add these, I get 9. So here's my answer. So let's go ahead and we're going to try plugging these in. We'll plug x plus 9 and then x plus 2. Okay? Let's go ahead and check our answer here. I'm going to go ahead and move this up here. And we'll say, okay, let's distribute. We'll do x, that's x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 9 times x is 9x. And 9 times 2 is 18. Put it together, I get x squared plus 11x plus 18. Okay? So it works. So really the idea is you're trying to find, okay, which two factors here, right? Which two numbers multiply to this and add that. Well, let's take a look at another example. Why don't you, well, no, we'll talk about this one together. So the idea here is, again, is, all right, I'm looking for two factors of 8 that are going to add to -6. Well, that creates a little bit of a problem here, right? Because it's a -6. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, what two numbers add, or what two numbers multiply to get to a positive, but when I add them, give me a negative? Well, that means my two factors of this are going to be two negatives, right? So I could have -8 times -1, okay, because that's going to equal 8 if I multiply it out, okay? And so what I can do here is I can maybe make, you know, sometimes people like to make a chart about this. Then they do this. They say factors, and they write product, and then, whoops, sorry, I just kind of moved this whole thing down. Let's put that back. Okay. We say product, and then we look at the sum. Okay? And so we say negative 8 times negative 1, well, that's 8. And then when you add them, it adds to negative 9. So that's not going to work. Well, let's see. What about negative 4 times negative 2? Well, the product of that is going to be 8, and the sum is going to be negative 6. Aha! So there we go. That's what we're going to look at. So we're going to do x minus 4, and then x minus 2. And what we do is you just go ahead and test it. X times x is going to be x squared, right? X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And then negative 4 times negative 2 is 8. When I simplify this, I'm going to get x squared minus 6x plus 8, which is my original equation. Okay? So that's, oops, that's not my answer. My answer is this. Okay? All right, well, hopefully that makes a little more sense here. Let's go ahead and take a look at another problem here. And again, what we're looking at is we're looking at, okay, which two factors, right? We're going to multiply to this and then add to 2. Well, right now, my product is negative 15, okay? So I need to look for my factors, okay, that multiply to negative 15. But then what's their sum when they add up, okay? So let's see. That means one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. Okay, so that means when I'm multiplying these, or when I'm adding them, that the positive value is going to have to be bigger than the negative one, right? In order to do this, because if I'm going to add to get positive 2, then I can't have, like if I do this, if I do negative 15 times 1, right? That's going to multiply to negative 15, but when I add that, that's negative 14. Okay, well that's not going to work. So you might say, okay, well negative 5 times 3, that equals negative 15. But when you add them, you get negative 2. Well, hopefully you see, oh wait, I need it to be positive 2. Let's just switch that around. So it should be 5 times negative 3. Well, when you add those, you get positive 2. Okay, so there you have it. We're going to say x plus 5, and then x minus 3. And when you test this out, you're going to get x squared. You'll get positive 5x. You'll get a negative 3x. Okay, so it's going to be x squared. And when you put those together, you're going to get plus 2x. And then 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Okay? Hopefully that worked out. Hopefully that makes a little more sense for you. Well, let's go ahead and let's put 4 problems up here. Why don't you go ahead and you try solving each of these, and what I will do after this is I will go ahead and I will I'll just put up the answers for you, and you can sort of figure it out and piece it together. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try doing these problems. Go. Alright, well hopefully you had a chance to take a look at this, and I'm going to put in here, I'm just going to put my 2 binomials. I know I'm going to have x and something else, and I look at this and this is positive, okay, and then this is positive, so it means I know that both of these factors are going to be positive numbers. Well, what 2 factors of 12 add to 7? Well, let's see, could it be 6 and 2? No, that's going to add to 8. How about 4 and 3? Yep, that works. So let's try x plus 4, x plus 3, and when you multiply this out, you'll see that it works. Okay. So if you haven't had a chance to try t yet, or 2, why don't you go ahead and pause the video. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at this, and you put down t, okay, and then t. All right, I'm looking at this has to be positive, so that both my factors are going to be either both positive or both negative. I look here when they're adding together. In order for them to add to be a negative, they're going to have to be, these 2 things are going to have to be negative. Well, let's see, what 2 factors add to 8? Would it be 4 and 3? No, that's not going to work. How about 6 and 2? Well, that does work. So let's try negative 6 and negative 2. And when you multiply that out, you'll see that it does work. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how to do number 3 here. So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, well, this is a negative 16. All right, so I'm going to have one positive and one negative, right? The only way to get a negative product is to have one positive and one negative. Then I look here and I say this is a positive 6, so that means that my bigger, right, the larger number that's a factor is going to have to be positive, and then the lower one will be negative. So I'm basically looking for the difference of the 2 factors here. Well, let's see. It can't be 4 and 4. It can't be 16 and 1. How about 8 and 2? So if I say W plus 8, right? Because I know that's going to have to be bigger, and w minus 2 if that's going to work. Well, let's see. If I do w times w, I get w squared. That works. If I do 8 times, well, let's see, 8 times negative 2, that gives me negative 16. Now let's see if they add. So then positive 8w and negative 2w. Yep, that's going to work. It's going to be positive 6w. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and try doing number 4 here. I know it's going to be m. All right. And I'm going to have m. And again, this is negative, so I know one of these is negative and one of them is positive. So I'm going to have to add one and subtract one. And what this tells me is, okay, this is only, well, there's really, that's a 1. Okay? And so what this is telling me is that the the one factor has to be, the negative factor in this one of 20 is going to be the larger number. And they're only 1 away from each other. Well, I'm thinking, what two factors of 20 are 1 away from each other? Well, that's 5 and 4, right? 5 and 4. Because they're only 1 away from each other. And that's sort of what, if you go back here, you're saying, okay, this is subtract. What two factors of 16 are 6 away from each other? Well, 8 and 2 are 6 away from each other. So here I would look at it and they say 5 and 4 are 1 away from each other. And this would be negative because it's 1 below, positive 4. Okay, well, hopefully you have a better idea with this. Why don't you go ahead? I've got some problems that I want you to work on. And then go ahead and do these problems. Bring them to class tomorrow with any questions that you might have. And hopefully I can answer them and we can work through maybe a couple more difficult ones as well. Okay, good luck.